The dust in the archival storeroom had a particular scent, a mixture of aged paper, polished oak, and forgotten time. Ilara Vance, her fingers smudged with the fine grime of decades, worked methodically through the last of the Cartwright estate donation. Old Hiram Cartwright had been a fixture in the town, a reclusive bachelor whose passing had left a house full of artifacts and silence. The museum expected ledgers, perhaps some local maps. They did not expect a love story. It was tucked beneath a stack of mundane farm account books from the 1940s, a box that seemed to swallow the dim overhead light rather than reflect it. Worn leather, the color of a long-dried bloodstain, soft to the touch. A simple black silk ribbon held it closed, tied in a neat bow that resisted her initial tug. The ribbon was not faded. It had been cared for, retied perhaps, a ritual maintained. A strange reverence settled over Ilara as she finally worked the knot loose. The lid opened with a soft, sighing creak. Inside, laid with meticulous precision, were envelopes, dozens of them, all facing the same direction, all of a similar size, all bearing the same flowing script in red ink. My dearest Valentine. The address below was consistent. 17 Maple Lane. The postmarks told the tale. February of 1952, 1953, 1954, marching in a solemn, annual parade through the decades. Her breath caught as she counted silently. 47. 47 Valentines spanning nearly half a century, each a silent sentinel of a singular affection. With careful hands, she lifted the first. The paper was crisp, substantial, the envelope flap still firmly sealed. A small, exquisitely hand-drawn rose adorned the corner where a stamp might otherwise be. The ink was a startlingly vibrant crimson, as if dipped yesterday. As she turned it, something shifted within. A single perfectly pressed rose petal, the color of a pale dawn, fluttered from between the pages of a folded letter she had not yet dared to remove. It landed on her archival sleeve, releasing a ghost of a scent, sweet and faintly spicy, a summer garden preserved in a winter of paper. The weight she felt then was not physical. It was the weight of a quiet, monumental mystery. This was no casual collection. This was a chronicle. Each envelope represented a year, a thought, a love poured onto a page and sent into the world, yet never signed. Who was the Valentine of Maple Lane, and who was the devoted hand that drew the same rose, year after year, in unwavering red? The storeroom faded around her. The hum of the climate control system became a distant whisper. Her cataloging project, a straightforward task of inventory, transformed in that instant. The official duty to tag, number, and store felt suddenly profane. These were not artifacts to be filed away under miscellaneous correspondence. They were heartbeats on paper. She placed the petal back into the 1952 envelope with infinite care, her fingers trembling slightly. The decision was made before she consciously formed the thought. She would document them, yes. But first, she would listen. She would follow this ribbon of red ink through time and discover the story whispered in 47 silent voices. The leather box sat open on the table, a portal to a past pulsing with unspoken devotion, and Ilara, the archivist, stepped through. The following morning, Ilara cleared a pristine workspace in the conservation lab, a sanctuary of controlled light and humidity. She donned white cotton gloves, their sterile touch feeling both respectful and alien against the soft leather of the bar box. The mystery had simmered in her mind all night, the scent of that single petal lingering in her memory like a half-remembered song. Now, with a scholar's discipline and a detective's focus, she began. She extracted the 1952 letter first, its paper whispering secrets as she unfolded it. The red ink blazed with a youthful fervor. The handwriting was elegant, masculine in its strong, clean lines, yet possessing a lyrical flow. It spoke of a dance at the old town hall, of a stolen moment on a balcony under a frosty February sky. You wore blue, the writer confessed, and the world narrowed to the space between our hands as we turned on the floor. The prose was effusive, poetic, a young man's heart laid bare. He wrote of a promise made that night, a vow spoken not in words, but in a held gaze, a silent pact that bound him irrevocably. The letter was a torrent of hope and adoration, ending with a pledge that echoed beyond the page. However long the road, my compass points to you. The 1955 letter, 3 years deeper into the chronicle, presented a different climate. The paper was the same quality, the rose symbol identical, but the emotional weather had shifted. The writer spoke of a separation, a duty that called him away. Military service was hinted at with a somber dignity. The passionate declarations had matured into a steadfast, aching resolve. "The distance is a physical weight I carry," he wrote, "but the memory of you is the counterweight that keeps me upright. I will wait. 1,000 days, 1,000 years. The promise stands." The constancy was breathtaking. No name, no return address, only this unwavering thread of devotion sent annually to a cottage on Maple Lane. Elara began her systematic notes, her own handwriting neat and clinical, beside the flowing script of the letters. She documented the consistent paper stock of the early years, the unwavering crimson ink that defied fading. The hand-drawn rose, she noted, was not a mere doodle. It was a signature. Each petal was rendered with deliberate, loving strokes, a tiny masterpiece of constancy. She measured it, precisely 1 centimeter in diameter on every envelope, positioned exactly in the upper left corner. This was a ritual, a code. Setting the letters aside with care, she turned to her computer, cross-referencing the address. City directories, digitized and dry, confirmed what the letters implied. 17 Maple Lane was a small, standalone cottage. The record showed no dramatic changes in ownership. It was a quiet, constant dot on the municipal map from the 1940s onward. A search of local census data revealed only a single occupant listed for decades: Eleanor Wren. The name settled in the room, giving a tentative identity to the recipient of this torrent of red ink. The emotional intimacy of the letters created a profound contrast with their physical anonymity. Here was a love story of epic, patient scale, yet it existed without a single identifying mark for its author. Who was this man whose hand remained so steady, whose heart remained so fixed? He documented a life, his departures, his loneliness, his unwavering focus, yet revealed nothing of his station, his face, his daily world. Elara felt like an eavesdropper on a conversation where one voice was a clear, beautiful bell, and the other was an eternal, listening silence. The cottage on Maple Lane became more than an address. It was a shrine, and these letters were annual pilgrimages. She closed the leather box, the scent of old paper, and resolved filling the quiet lab, her curiosity now a dedicated quest. The letters from the early 1960s rested in Elara's gloved hands like captured sunlight, their pages holding the warmth of a shared world now vanished. The writer's voice had deepened, the youthful effusion mellowing into a rich, devoted affection. The 1961 letter was a sensory tapestry, weaving the memory of hot chocolate at the gilded cup. He described the steam curling in the air, the clink of porcelain, the way the winter light fell through the front window and gilded the rim of her cup. A detail so intimate it made Elara's breath catch. She knew of the cafe. It had closed in the late 70s, its location now a pharmacy. But in his words, it was forever a century of whispered conversations and interlaced fingers under the table. The 1962 letter provided the first concrete anchor in real time. He wrote of the distant glow of the Seattle World's Fair, of how they had listened to radio broadcasts together, imagining the Space Needle piercing the sky. "We have our own World's Fair," he wrote, "in the quiet of our park bench. No monument could rival its significance to me." That bench, he specified, was the third one along the north path of Riverside Park, facing the old oak. Elara could picture it perfectly. The oak was still there, gnarled and majestic. The letter transformed the ordinary into the sacred. That bench was their altar, the park their cathedral. It was in the 1963 correspondence that a new pivotal clue emerged, wrapped in a tone of profound bittersweetness. The writer's usual Valentine's reflections were present, but they were overshadowed by a deeper, more personal anniversary. "As ever, my heart arrives with this rose," he began, "but my soul is already counting the days until our June 14th. It is the true axis of my year, the day my life truly began, and the day I understood the exquisite pain of a happiness that must live in shadows." The mention was a lightning bolt. June 14th, not a holiday, but a private sun around which their secret love orbited. The joy in his recollection was palpable, a vivid memory of a summer meeting, but it was inextricably twined with a sorrow so deep it seemed to stain the paper. He did not explain the sorrow, only let it linger in the spaces between his words, a silent partner to the joy. Elara sat back, the letter held carefully before her. The mystery was no longer a simple question of identity. It was now a question of circumstance. What had happened on a June 14th, presumably in some year before 1952? that was so foundational? Why did its memory bring both radiant joy and this undercurrent of grief? The writer's love was steadfast, but it was clearly framed by a separation that was more than physical distance. It was a separation dictated by life itself, by duty, by prior commitment, by the unyielding structures of the world they inhabited. The park bench and the closed cafe were not just romantic rendezvous. They were ports in a storm, fleeting havens. Her curiosity, once academic, now burned with a personal intensity. This was no longer just an archival puzzle to be solved. It was a story of endurance, of a love that chose fidelity over possession, that found a way to breathe across decades within the narrow space of handwritten pages and a single annual postmark. Who were they? What silent agreement bound them to this beautiful, heartbreaking pattern? Eleanor Wren of Maple Lane was no longer just a name in a directory. She was the keeper of this June 14th secret, the silent recipient of a lifetime of devotion that celebrated a day hidden from the calendar. Elara felt a compelling need to understand not just the facts but the texture of their sacrifice and the quiet triumph of their constancy. The quest had deepened, moving from her mind to her very heart. She carefully returned the 1963 letter to its envelope, the hand-drawn rose seeming to watch her, a symbol of a love that had bloomed perennially in the dark, nourished by memory and sustained by a promise whose contours she was only beginning to perceive. The letter from 1973 felt different even before Elara opened it. The envelope slightly thicker, its edges softened by more than just time. As she unfolded the familiar paper, a small, black and white photograph, its corners gently rounded, slipped from its embrace and fluttered into her lap. She caught her breath. It was a snapshot of two silhouettes, standing on a rise against a vast, dying sunset. They were hand in hand, their forms blending into a single dark shape against the incendiary sky. Their faces were turned away from the camera, looking toward the horizon, intimate yet anonymous, a perfect representation of the entire correspondence. On the back, in the same red ink, was written a single date, June 14th, 1973. The promised day, captured in monochrome glory. The accompanying letter spoke of that brief, precious meeting, of hours stolen from the relentless flow of ordinary life. The writer's prose was lush with the sensory details of the moment, the scent of dry grass, the cooling air, the weight of her hand in his. Yet, woven through the joy was the old, familiar thread of restraint. We watched the light leave the world, he wrote, and I understood again the distance that still must be kept. It is the price of this treasure, and I pay it willingly. But oh, how the heart aches at the setting of the sun. The photograph was not just a memento. It was a testament. It proved their love was not a phantom of ink and longing. They had stood together in a real place on their sacred day. Yet, by keeping their faces hidden even from this private record, they maintained the sanctity of their secret. Elara held the image under the lamp, the two dark figures forever fixed in that moment of shared, silent watching, and felt a profound pang of empathy for the beautiful, painful boundaries of their world. It was nearly a decade later, around 1980, that Elara noticed the first subtle but unmistakable change. The handwriting in the Valentine from 1979 was as steady as ever, a masterpiece of consistent control. But the 1980 letter, while still elegant, showed the faintest tremor in the downstrokes, a slight softening of the once crisp lines. It was not a decline of affection, but perhaps the gentle intrusion of age, a physical whisper of passing time. The writer acknowledged it himself in the 1981 letter with a characteristic grace. My hand is not as steady as it once was, he confessed, but my heart's direction has never been more true. The vessel may weather, but the course is fixed. The tone of the letters from this era underwent a parallel beautiful shift. The passionate longing of the early years and the rich devotion of the middle decades had now matured into something quieter, deeper, more sustaining. Love was no longer a fierce fire, but a steady glowing hearth. He wrote less of aching absence and more of cherished memory, of the way a particular song on the radio could conjure her laugh, or how the smell of rain on pavement always brought back the walk they once took in a summer storm. We have built a country of moments, he wrote in 1985. I live there more than I do in the world of streets and back houses. It is a land without borders, populated by our smiles, our silences, our June sunsets. The love had become a spiritual sustenance, a private universe complete in itself. Moved by this poignant evolution, Elara found herself sharing the discovery with her grandmother, May, over cups of tea in her cozy, cluttered kitchen. She described the letters, the photograph, the unwavering annual rose. When she mentioned the address, 17 Maple Lane, May's eyes widened in recognition. Setting her teacup down with a soft clink, she nodded slowly. Eleanor Wren, she said, the name familiar. On her tongue, a kind woman, very quiet, very solitary. She lived there forever, it seemed. Always kept her garden beautifully, roses, of course. She used to volunteer at the library sorting books, polite but distant, like she was living somewhere else part of the time. May paused, her gaze turning inward. She passed away some years back. Lived alone, died alone, I believe. Such a gentle soul. I always wondered what her story was. Elara felt a shiver of connection. The silent recipient now had a face in someone's memory. A gentle woman with roses in her garden. A woman who carried a secret country in her heart, built year by year from red ink on crisp paper. The mystery was deepening, becoming rooted in the real soil of the town, and Elara felt the weight of the story settling around her, more poignant and real than ever. The letters from the 1990s arrived in Elara's hands like autumn leaves, each one tinged with a poignant golden melancholy. The paper, now a modern bond, felt thinner, the envelopes less substantial, but the red ink and the rose remained, steadfast as the North Star. The writer's hand, however, told a quieter story. The elegant script of the 1950s had softened into a more fragile, though no less deliberate, cursive. The tremor noticed in the 1980s had become a gentle, persistent wave, each stroke a testament to time's patient erosion. Yet, the voice within had distilled into something remarkably pure, a love clarified by decades of silent fidelity. The 1995 letter was particularly profound. The writer reflected not on a single moment, but on the vast architecture of a shared, hidden life. Time is a river we have watched from separate banks, he wrote, yet I have always seen your reflection in its waters. We have measured our lives not in years, but in the space between February and June, in the anticipation of a postmark and the memory of a sunset. He then invoked the core of their mystery, the unshakable pact. I think often of the promise we made to be true, if not together. It was not together. It was not a chain, but a key. It unlocked a world that existed for us alone, a world where love was not about possession, but about presence across every distance. The phrase, if not together, hung in the air, a heartbreaking summation of their entire story. Their togetherness was not of shared daily life, but of a spiritual alignment that had endured for nearly half a century. He circled, again, the enigmatic date. Soon, it will be June 14th again, our day, the day the universe shifted. I will be there, as I always am in spirit, at the hour we first met. Do you remember the light through the leaves? It has illuminated every shadow of my life since. The reference was more direct than ever, yet it remained a private constellation. Elara understood now that this was not merely an anniversary of a first kiss or a declaration. It was the anniversary of a meeting that had irrevocably defined two lives, a moment of recognition so powerful it created a parallel timeline celebrated only in these pages and, presumably, in the silent heart of Eleanor Wren. Prompted by her grandmother's recollection and armed with this deepening emotional context, Elara turned from the letters to the cold, factual trail. In the quiet of the county records office, surrounded by the hum of microfilm readers and the scent of old ledgers, she began her search. The public records were stark, unadorned by red ink or roses. She found Eleanor Wren with a librarian's efficiency. The documents confirmed she had taken possession of 17 Maple Lane in 1945. A young woman in a post-war world, she was listed as the sole owner and occupant through every subsequent decade. The records marched forward, a dry chronology, until they reached their final quiet entry. Eleanor Wren had died in the spring of 1990. The cause was listed simply as heart failure. The box for marital status was checked single. The space for next of kin was left blank. Elara sat back, the clinical finality of the record settling over her like a fine dust. Eleanor Wren had died as she had lived, unmarried, with no immediate family. The cottage on Maple Lane, the shrine that had received 47 Valentines, had fallen silent. Yet, Elara felt no sense of a story ending in loneliness. Instead, she felt a profound, bittersweet connection to this woman whose life had been the silent counterpart to a symphony of devotion. Eleanor had not died alone. She had died holding a secret world, a country built from annual letters and the memory of a June day. She was the keeper of the promise. The emptiness of the official form was a lie. Her life had been filled to the brim with a love that asked for nothing but its own existence. Elara left the records office not with a solved mystery, but with a deepened reverence. The trail of facts had converged with the trail of feeling, and at their intersection stood the quiet figure of Eleanor, a woman who had received a lifetime of love in envelopes, and who had, in her silent way, returned it in full. The last envelope lay alone in the bottom of the box, a solitary sentinel at the end of a long, red ink road. Its postmark was February 12th, 1990, the year Eleanor died. Elara's hands, still clad in white cotton, hovered over it. The air in the conservation lab felt charged, thick with the silence of concluded things. This was the final word. The last page of a story, written across 47 years. She lifted it with a reverence bordering on solemnity, feeling the slight, fragile weight of a lifetime distilled into a single sheet. The paper was modern, a simple white bond, but the envelope bore the same address in a script that was now unmistakably frail. The lines wavered, the elegant flow broken by the unsteady hand of great age or infirmity. Yet the effort was deliberate, each letter formed with immense care, as if the act of writing this last message required the summoning of every remaining ounce of strength and love. The small rose in the corner was there, but its petals were drawn with a faint, trembling line, a ghost of the bold symbol from 1952. It was, perhaps, the most beautiful one of all. Inside, the letter was shorter than any that had come before. The economy of words was not born of dwindling feeling, but of its absolute concentration. It was a love reduced to its essential elements, a final, clear note held against the silence. My dearest Valentine, it began, the salutation a ritual performed one last time. The winter is deep this year, and my hand struggles to obey my heart. But the heart insists, as it always has, this will be my last rose. Do not grieve for its ending. Think instead of the garden we planted in a single summer's glance, a garden that has bloomed for a lifetime in the secret soil of us. Then the revelation, offered simply as if it were the most natural truth in the world. You asked me once, long ago, why I held our June 14th above all other days. It was the day I first saw you, not at a dance or in a crowded room, but in the sunlight dappling through the oak leaves in Riverside Park. You were reading a book on our bench, the third one on the north path. You looked up. I was passing by. Our eyes met, and the world simply rearranged itself. It was a summer day in 1951. No holiday marked it. No one else celebrated it. But for us, it was the day creation began anew. Elara's vision blurred. The private sun around which this entire hidden universe had orbited was, at its core, a moment of pure, unadorned recognition. A glance. A meeting of eyes. The most ordinary of miracles that had spawned an extraordinary devotion. The writer continued, addressing the central mystery of their separation with a dignified, heartbreaking clarity. Circumstance built its walls. A prior commitment made in younger years, a family duty I could not in honor abandon. The world demanded I walk a path that could never publicly intersect with yours. I have walked it, and I have kept my word to that other life. But know this, my only love. That path was geography. It was not my country. The true country of my soul was the land we mapped together in letters, in memories, in the sacred space of June 14th. It is the only homeland I have ever known. The words settled in the quiet room, a perfect, bittersweet explanation. It was not a tale of scandal or tragedy, but of quiet honor and profound sacrifice. A man bound by a promise to one life, who had chosen to love truly and faithfully within the only space left to him, the space of ink and memory and an annual, unsigned Valentine. The letter neared its close. They say love is a flame. Ours has been a constant, gentle light, needing no air but our remembrance to burn. It has illuminated my every step. Wherever I am going now, I carry that light with me. It is my compass, still and always. And then the signature, not a name, not initials. After a lifetime of anonymity, the final act was one of poetic, perfect consistency. Beneath the closing words, "Forever yours," the writer had drawn, with painstaking care, a single rose. It was complete, with stem and thorns and a delicate, unfurling bloom. It was his name. It had always been his name. Elara sat for a long time, the final letter resting on the archival mat. The mystery was solved, yet it felt not like a solution, but like a completion. She had come seeking a who, and had found a what that was infinitely more profound. She had witnessed a love that did not demand, did not possess, did not seek to reshape the world to its will. Instead, it had created a parallel world, a true country that existed in the space between a post box and a cottage door, in the memory of sunlight through oak leaves on a June afternoon. It was a love that proved its fidelity not through grand gestures, but through the relentless annual return of a crimson rose on a page. With a heart full of a quiet, expansive awe, she began the careful process of returning the letters to their leather home. She placed the last envelope on top of the orderly stack, the frail rose facing upward. She tied the black silk ribbon once more, her own fingers readying the bow that had been undone for her investigation. The story was complete. The archivist's task was done, but as she placed the sealed box into the museum's permanent collection, she knew she was storing away not an artifact, but a testament. The mystery was solved, not with a name, but with the comfort of love's enduring whisper, a whisper that had, for 47 years, been as steady and real as the turning of the seasons.